Today we have an age-old question that needs to be asked that I haven't seen asked before, so we're going to ask it here today. And that is, which is better? Is it better to use traditional old hand tools to make a spoon, or is it better to use the more modern tools to make a spoon? So, let's get into it. So, before we really begin to go through how all these spoons are made and what makes the process different, we need to first start with taking a look at some of the tools. So, when I say traditional tools, what I'm thinking of is something like an axe or hatchet of some sort to do the shaping of the spoon. And I'm thinking of maybe a hook knife or maybe a gouge to kind of carve out the bowl of the spoon. And I'm thinking of a knife to do all of the in between work. Um, Maybe even a draw knife in there too. There's a couple different ways that you could do that, even in the uh, more traditional way of making a spoon, as you're seeing here. You could also use a draw knife, like I mentioned just a second ago, to kind of help carve out all of um, the handle and kind of get some of that shaping done, detailed shaping. Because this is great, but an axe is very easy to mess up and blow out the bowl or go too deep or anything like that. This is a little bit easier to control how much material you're taking off. But depending upon what kind of traditional carpenter you are, you might say that this draw knife is not as traditional. So we'll make allowances for that, but that's kind of what we're looking at on the traditional end or handwood carving end of making a spoon. So let's take a look at what it would look like for the other spoon. All right, so one of the first tools that you'd probably see in a conventional shop today or a more modern shop is something very similar to this. This is oh, good grief. So, in order to just kind of go through and figure out what the differences are between a more traditional way of making a spoon and a less traditional but more conventional or modern way of making a spoon, what I've done here is just drawn out two templates on two different pieces of wood. This one here is out of Aframasia wood, which is like an Africa teak, and I think it'll be really, really pretty. But we're going to do the more conventional method for making a spoon out of this piece. And then this is just a piece of black cherry that I have. This is what I normally make spoons out of. And yeah, that's what it's out of. Now, we can kind of see just right off the bat with the pieces of wood that there's some differences between making a traditional spoon and making a more conventional spoon. This black cherry, I have put in water, so it's actually wet, and there's a reason for that. I want it to be rather moist because it's a lot easier to carve. Whenever you're doing something with hand, it's sometimes a lot easier just to get it a little bit moist and then work with it. If it's something that's really, really dry, sometimes that can be good. Other times, though, it can be as hard as rock. And that's not so great in my world. However, this piece of Aframasia is actually quite dense, and I would not want to carve this by hand. Just saying. So, strength for conventional, it's a lot easier to get through things when they are a little bit harder and denser. Strength for the more traditional way of making a spoon is I can use a big piece of wood that's a lot thicker. And what I'll try to do with this piece is actually give it a curve to it. I can't really do that with a piece of scrap wood from the shop because it's already kind of at its own length. I can maybe curve it a little bit to make a curve or an arch to the spoon, but not by much. I'm very limited, and I'll show you why I'm limited here in just a second when we go to cut this out. So right off the bat, those are some of the differences. They are both using scrap pieces of wood, and I think they'll both be very pretty spoons, but there are some differences just out the gate. So let's get to it and see if we can make a spoon or two. So I'm going to call this a powered coping saw. I think there's actually a much better name for it. So if you guys can remember that and put that in the comments down below, that'd be great and very, very helpful. However, the name of it is completely eluding me today. Normally, in most shops today, you would actually see a bandsaw, which is a much longer blade than what this one is. And it actually goes up in a big oval around on two wheels that spin it, and it spins really, really quick. But the effect is about the same. You normally get what you carve out. So I'm not like super proficient at using these, by the way, which is why it's kind of not the greatest thing in the world. But guys who do this a lot would basically make it so there's no black lines anywhere on here, and it would be perfect, which is awesome. So you can definitely get your shape. You can do more intricate shapes with these saws than what I could do with axe. Okay, just that's a big win if you're trying to do something that's super, super intricate. And it doesn't take very long to make one of these. This took, and this is me not knowing how to do it very well and kind of going slow, and you'll see in the video that I messed up and had to back up my project, which is not what you're supposed to do. But basically that took me probably less than 10 minutes to cut this out. And this is really, really hard wood, by the way. This is, again, not something that I'd really want to cut with an axe. It would just be torture on my hands, essentially. So that's a really big win. Now, this has already been planed and stuff, so we could take a bigger board and plane it down, or we could take a rough saw and plane it down, anything like that in the more conventional world. And we could take any size and bring it down to the size. Instead of cutting out my shape and having this much waste, I could have cut this on the table saw, excuse me, over there. And that would have basically allowed me to have another piece of wood that would be a straight edge. So your waste factor is a lot less. Now comes the fun part of actually carving this out. And this is where traditional and non-traditional, conventional can get very close to the same. And there's about two differences between it. There's two ways that I could go with this. There is the average way of going, which is the way that I can show you. And then there's like the super high-tech way of going. And I don't have the super high-tech way. And that super high-tech way is with a CNC machine. You see, a CNC machine would be able to cut this out and put the bowl in it and bring it down to size all in one. And you don't really have to do much. You just put it in the machine, put your computer program in, and it would do it. And you can do like a couple thousand of them. Pretty snazzy and pretty simply. I don't have a CNC machine, so I'm going to do it the other way, which is where now what you would do is you would go back to taking a knife on it and carve it out. A lot of people do it from here because it's just, again, it only took me 10 minutes to do this. My arms don't hurt, and it's pretty simple. So that's a major win for a lot of people who are doing spoon carving. And you can get your symmetry very, very well in this. You can keep your symmetry is what I should say. So yeah, those are some of the perks of doing it that way. So now I'm going to show you the other way of doing it, which is the more traditional. So this is going to bug me if I don't fix this. I just want it to be kind of level. Okay. So when we go and start doing the more traditional way of making a spoon, the first two things that I have to do are make some cuts. So you can see right here, I have drawn a line across here. This is called a stop cut line. And then this line down here is just getting rid of that excess piece of wood. So the stop cut basically allows me when I'm chopping to not take off the bowl. I want to keep the bowl as much as I possibly can and not get rid of it. For obvious reasons, it wouldn't be a spoon if you didn't have a bowl of a spoon. It just doesn't work very well. Then at that point, it would just be a stick. And nobody really needs a stick. So, yeah, I'll cut this and then cut that real quick here. And then we'll be able to get going. on making the actual spoon. And again, we're doing traditional stuff, so if you're thinking that I was doing this with a skill saw or something, you would be mistaken. I'm just going to use a traditional handsaw here, nothing too fancy, and try to get my strokes in nice and even to there. Get pretty close to the line, but not all the way there. And while I'm here, I'm just going to do this too. Get rid of this extra wood. Right back here. All right. And then we're going to make our other stop cut right over here. All right. So there you have it. Now there's a cut here, and there's a cut here. And it's a lot shorter now. Now we're actually at the size that I want to be at for making the spoon here. So now all we got to do is shape it out. So now I've got them both cut out. So I've got the conventional way of making a spoon on this side. You can see it's nice and tight, pretty close to the line, all that fun stuff. And then after using a hatchet, this still needs work. So this is where, if you were doing traditional woodworking, you have two methods that you could go down. You could either um, get better at using a hatchet, which you could do on this, and get a little tighter to the lines, but you do risk getting a little too close. Like you can kind of see up there, I shaved off the line a little bit with my hatchet. Or you could use this to kind of get a little bit further. This is called a draw knife, if you don't know. What this is, and this is I'll be demonstrating this soon because this is the one that I use when I make spoons. Or you can go the purest method and go straight to a knife now and start using this and whittling it down to get to your actual size. So those are your two options at this point for continuing to make this. It also depends on what kind of style you're going for and all of that fun stuff. This, though, is ready to go to either get the bowl into it or start shaping it. This one, I can put the bowl in now. So they both are at that point, so that's probably what I'm going to do next. Is put the bowls in and then continue on forward. Now, as I mentioned, a little bit earlier, a CNC machine would probably cut this, okay, out with just its own tools there. You cut that out and make a nice, perfect bowl. That is how most manufacturers will do odd shaped designs as well. They cut it out just the same way I did on a bandsaw or something like that. And then they have a program on their CNC machine to cut this out nice and perfectly. I don't have that option out here, so I'm not showing that today. I have a gouge and I have a hook knife. So we're going to use both of them, probably a little bit intermittently here, to put in the bowls on both these spoons. So that's what we're looking at. So yeah, we'll get to it. so this is what we got. We got the bowl put in on this spoon here, and we got the bowl put in on this spoon here. Now I will say, it was a lot harder to put it in on this one. This wood is really, really dense. It's that Afromasia wood, and it'll be very pretty, but it is very dense. So the carving process on this is going to take a lot longer than the cutting out process. Now this guy, this was super easy to put the bowl in. Yeah, just it cut like butter. It was awesome. So that was pretty good. So now comes the fun part of actually shaping these things to make them look like a spoon, not just chunks of wood that are in somewhat forms of spoons. So yeah, that's the next problem. Alright, so this is what I got so far. I've done all the whittling on these, and I just ran over them with a scraper. I used a scraper instead of sandpaper just because it's a lot faster than sandpaper is, and it gives you a pretty good um, finish on there as well. So this is what they look like. They look pretty similar. Again, doing it by hand on the end would make them very, very similar. Now I need to mention that if these were again being made in if you had like a lathe or something to make a spoon, you could probably use it to make a handle that is completely round. That would be a bit more like a bamboo spoon. This is probably made with that, or this one might even be made with again that CNC machine just to cut this all the way on down to make that nice round handle there. You can also tell that this one was a piece of wood that was about that thick, and then they just cut out the middle of it there, the bowl of it, and then shaped it really quick. But you can also tell this one has been warped. It was flat at one point and straight, but it's not anymore. That's because it went through a dishwasher. You should never, if you have any wooden spoons, don't put them in a dishwasher. The heat from all the water and stuff can affect them and make them warp. Um, so yeah, just word to there to the wise. Um, but yeah, going back to our spoons, they do look very, very similar. And now that we're pretty much at the end of this video, we're getting pretty close. And if you've been watching it for this long, please consider subscribing if you like the content. Yeah, and hit a like button on there too. That would really help me out. But anyhow, um, yeah, which way is the best way? We have to answer that question. And I think what it really comes down to is you. What do you like? Do you like, if you're getting into wood carving or if you've been to wood carving for a long time, which method do you like better? Um, if you've been doing the conventional method, this would be a lot easier to make than trying to get the tools for this. Also depends on which one, you'd have to put money towards either one to get the different tools needed to make them. Some tools are similar. Like if you do it the way that I did it, either way you would need a spoon gouge or a hook knife or a different type of scoop gouge as well. Um, Either way, you would need one of those, and you would need a good carving knife. So those would be about the closest similarity in this video with how the style that I made both these spoons with. The only major difference would be the saw. That was the biggest difference in the making of both of these. Um, and just real quick, that saw is nice. However, it can't do a very thick piece of wood. You're very limited on doing a thin piece of wood. However, I can't do a piece of wood that's super hard. Even carving this spoon was very difficult. There's also a lot of grain differences in here. There's a grain change that's right here in the spoon and also here on the back of the spoon. That's not fun to play with. You get a lot of tear out, which isn't fun. If you did it with a grinder, you could even use a grinder with a grinding wheel similar to this. This is what I use on bowls. And you could probably shape this out and not have as much tear out. They have other grinding wheels that would probably even be better than that to grind them out. But anyhow, which way is better? Well, it's again your preference. If you like making them quickly, then make them quickly. And if you like the result that you get, then do it that way. And if that's more comfortable for you and you have the equipment for it, do it. However, on the other side, if you have the equipment to do it and you like the process of making a spoon and trying to be creative and not, force your own interpretation into the spoon, which you can do that with both of them, but sometimes it's a little easier to do that traditionally. Like you could take a branch that's bent and use that to make a spoon. You can't do that when it's trying to go through that saw. I can't do anything that's that big. Now, maybe on a bandsaw you could do that, but it would still be a little easier to do that with an axe. Okay, there's a a little bit more variety that you could make with that. But it's also your preference. Do you like working with green wood? Do you like working with, the hand tools? I personally enjoy that. I like having all of my fingers. Um, and not that you can be safe and use a bandsaw or a coping saw like that too. But I don't know. I also don't like the noise of big equipment like that. So that's why I predominantly do it this way. I also think it's just kind of cool to say that this is completely handmade. Um, except for cutting down the tree. I did use a chainsaw on that. But yeah, it's completely handmade from that standpoint. This one, you could still argue that it's handmade and probably be right on that too. I just prefer the purist method over here. So yeah, that is the two different ways of making a spoon. And so now all I'm going to do is finish them out and give them a good coat of oil and burnish them first, though, and then they should be ready to go. So, yeah, that's the two differences between making spoons. So, yeah, let's catch you guys in the next one.